Please be seated. You are all very welcome to Hackney's Council Chamber to commemorate Holocaust Memorial Day here at Hackney Town Hall. Thank you for joining us. The song we've just heard is called Believe, sung by Star Voices Children's Choir and kindly contributed by the Olive School. We are most grateful to the children for their contribution. January 27, when the Auschwitz-Belsen concentration camps were liberated in 1945, marks the day when we remember a world scarred by genocide and the 6 million Jewish people murdered during the Holocaust of World War II, alongside the millions of other people killed under Nazi persecution of other groups. We also today gather together and remember other genocides that followed in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia and Darfur. The theme for Holocaust Memorial Day 2024 is the fragility of freedom, and we will be reflecting on this throughout today's event. Recorded music for the ceremony has also been kindly shared by the East London School of Music, and we are again grateful to them for their contribution. I am now going to hand over to the children from Simon Marks Jewish Primary School. Thank you. Thank you very much to the children of Simon Marks. That was really, really beautiful. Thank you. We will now be hearing from Councillor Rathbone and a tribute to the history of Hackney's ceremony. Thank you.
All it needs for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. I wanted to say a few words to mark the milestone of Holocaust Memorial Day in Hackney. which was started 22 years ago in January 2002. It started with a notification to the council from the Home Office in 2001 that the Labour Home Secretary, David Blunkett, had set up the National Holocaust Memorial Day group in order to highlight the Holocaust and other genocides. At that time, the council was in severe financial difficulties, and it was said that we could not do it. I was a senior manager in the council at that time, and I discussed it with the chief exec. And after he warned me I was playing with fire, he eventually agreed to do it if I did not spend any money, because the council was broke. So firstly, I wanted to mount an exhibition with a catalogue, and I've left it over here. This is the catalogue that I produced with help from the education department. And people in the education department sat down with me, and we put together some materials to make this an educational booklet for schools and others, with articles on Nazis in Britain today, a history of migration, racism today, and information on genocide in Rwanda and in Bosnia, with lots of information, contacts, website links. It was eventually used in a lot of schools in Hackney. Some of the information was based on the Auschwitz study pack, produced under the auspices of the old Inner London Education Authority, the first document of its kind to be used in London schools and then around the country, and was part of the campaign which we eventually succeeded to have the Holocaust as a curricular item. And I've always been proud to be part of that team which produced it and pressed the study of the Holocaust and genocide into the curriculum. Good people doing something. I persuaded the then leader of the council and the civic mayor to write a foreword to the booklet. And as I say, this is the booklet. You can have a look at it afterwards. I think it's probably one of the few remaining copies. But it also had an exhibition as well, which we mounted in the Central Library. None of it cost a penny. The chief exec afterwards said to me, it was the right thing to do. It was the right thing to do after he had disagreed, and he gave his full support after that. And it's right because of the communities that we have. It's right because our children need to know and learn from history. And it's right because I am not Jewish. I'm not a Muslim either. I'm a Christian, and concerned that whatever our faith, we must not forget what has happened to those who are as human as we are, our brothers and sisters around the world. That first ceremony was very moving and felt very daring. The police surrounded the town hall, and crowd barriers were put up everywhere, just in case we were stormed by the present-day Nazis. But for those who know those people, it didn't happen because they're just full of empty threats, as usual. In later years, Nicola Babineau joined us, and she was an absolute tower of strength and support, such a wonderful and dedicated person to work with, taking on new ideas, exploring new ways, and any way to get young people involved. And the young people today, as it were, are the legacy of her work, that schools are involved in this process as well, because Nicola was very involved with schools. And she encouraged young people to come here and express their feelings about their encounter with concentration camps and other genocide across the world. Why did we do it? because if we didn't, then we would be allowing such evil to triumph in the minds of each succeeding generation. Never again, we say, as determinedly as we can, because it could be something that happens that we don't know. Never again is one way of saying, no, we're not going to allow it. And that's why you and I are here today, why we must continue to do this every year. Why we must continue to challenge racism in all its forms and wherever it rears its head, because it could be a bus stop on the way to the terminus of genocide. Something that starts as a playground jibe grows into senseless mass murder. Along the way over the years, I continued to experience opposition within the council and from some councillors to HMD, but as some of you know, I'm very obstinate and I always persist. People began to see and understand the need for it, and now, today, it has wonderfully become a part of the civic calendar. I'm very pleased. So let's remember, all it needs for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. Today we join with countless others around the UK to take a stand against the evil of genocide, against the evil of the Holocaust, to take a stand against any kind of hatred of others, and to speak up for tolerance of others. Each time we remember is each time we are doing something to call out evil, each time doing something to prevent evil from triumphing, each time taking steps for toleration and understanding, each time exposing the darkness of hate to the light of goodness and togetherness and harmony of humankind, and to celebrate those who have survived. All it needs for good to triumph is for good people to do something, like now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rathbone, and thank you for your years of service on this. I'm now going to invite Mayor Caroline Woodley, and she will be speaking on this year's theme, the fragility of freedom.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Speaker, to you and your team for bringing representatives from across our borough together. Thank you to Councillor Rathbone for your account of how we established Holocaust Memorial Day in Hackney and how it gives local people a chance to stand together and remember. Thank you to the children of Simon Marks Jewish Primary School who have lifted us with their presence and voices. They have so often invited us into their school to hear them and so often attended our events, and they're just so wonderful. It's so important to have guests here today spanning the generations. In London, even now in 2024, the effects of the Holocaust continue to live with us. The theme of this year's Holocaust Memorial Day is the fragility of freedom. We start with remembrance. The genocides we look back on, the Nazi Holocaust and persecutions, Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia, and Darfur may move further into the past, but these terrible events will never be just history. They are a reminder of the fragility of the peaceful and lawful existences we lead today. The consequences of genocide shape our society, our neighbourhoods, and our families. By learning about how they came about and the terrible impact they have had on people, we can better protect our freedoms today and into the future. And that means protecting those at risk. As people who are lucky enough to live in a broadly safe and stable country, it is our duty to offer sanctuary to those fleeing danger. I am proud that Hackney has helped refugees and asylum seekers from Ukraine, Afghanistan, Iran, and elsewhere resettle and build new lives. Now our government must do all it can to help those suffering violence today and enable peace. And this feels especially poignant in considering current events and recent events in Ukraine, in the Middle East, and other parts of the world in conflict today. Holocaust Memorial Day should also remind us to protect our freedoms here. We must ensure all in our communities can benefit from our freedoms. The freedom to walk the streets safely, the freedom to express our faiths and identity, and the freedom to make the most of our talents and ambitions. Prejudice and poverty mean that far too many residents, these freedoms are limited. As Mayor, I will work to change that. We will welcome those fleeing danger. We will celebrate the respectful borough we live in, and we will take decisive action against those who act with hate and prejudice. I'm grateful for this opportunity to remember all those who have lost their lives and livelihoods. They should never be forgotten. I know that the message of the fragility of freedom and the words of our guests here today will stay with me and inform my work as Mayor. I hope that all of us will take this moment of remembrance forward into our daily lives so that we can go on living free from danger and oppression that so many others are forced to endure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Woodley. Hatred leading to genocide has been seen in other parts of the world. And on Holocaust Memorial Day, we also sadly mark those other times when innocent civilians have lost their lives through hatred allowed or generated by a government or those in authority. I now invite Sandy Stanton who's going to read Out of the Tragedy, Some Joy and a Happy Life. Thank you.
I'm reading this out on behalf of my friend of over 40 years, Zsuzsa Susan Weiss. Zsuzsa has lived and worked in Hackney, including Simon Marks School, for over 17 years, since she arrived in the UK from Hungary in 1967, having lived there through both the Second World War and the Hungarian uprising. I will be reading her story in the first person and apologise in advance for my pronunciations. Zsuzsa doesn't consider herself to be a survivor, and I'll let you decide. My name is Zsuzsa Weiss, née Klasner. I was born in Budapest, Hungary, just a few months before the Second World War started. My father, Martin Krasner, was called up to serve in a labour camp, and by the end of 1942, my mother was informed he was missing, presumed dead. I was taken to Tarsal, a village in the north of the country, to stay for my safety with my maternal grandparents. In the spring of 1944, we were taken to a ghetto in Szatmárhely, on the border of what is now Slovakia. My mother became very concerned and wanted me to be home in Budapest with her and my younger sister. A non-Jewish friend of the family, who was willing to assume the role of my father, came to fetch me to take me back to Budapest. I still remember the long journey home on the train, having to remember to call him Apuka, Daddy. A few days after I returned home, everybody from the ghetto was taken to Auschwitz, including my grandparents, my disabled uncle, my young cousin, all of whom were sent to the gas chambers and murdered. In the summer of 1944, my mother, Eva Frankel, was reported for not wearing her yellow star, which led to her being forcibly taken from the streets and sent to Lichtenwerth concentration camp in Austria. A non-Jewish relative took me and my sister to a Red Cross home for our safety. It was good to start with, but once the bombing started, we were taken down to the cellar and left there. My sister and I never moved from the upper bed where there was no mattress for us to cover us. Our only sustenance was a bowl of some kind of soup each day. Early that February 1945, the Russians liberated Budapest, and they came to release us from the cellar where we had been imprisoned. I still remember the taste of the thick jam the soldiers offered us. It was truly delicious. After the war, the man who had been in charge of the home was executed by the Russians for war crimes against the residents, including the charge that in the same room as the children and nursing mothers with dead babies. It was very traumatic. When we returned to my grandparents, we could not walk properly as our feet were numb with cold and we were mute, not talking at all apart from between ourselves. Although my grandfather provided us with plenty of nutritious food, we remained in a traumatized state, and I was overheard telling my sister that we must be sure not to eat all of the bread and butter, but to save some for the next day. When my sister and I emerged from our ordeal, we were covered in lice, hair and body, and my aunt worked tirelessly to get us back to our normal state. We found out in April that my mother had survived the camp and was in hospital with typhus. My grandfather went and brought her back to us. By this time, I was with my aunt and uncle in Nurahazol, a big city in the northeast of the country. My mother was convinced that I hadn't survived and refused to believe that I had survived until she saw me in the flesh. Although she recovered from typhoid, she suffered from ill health all her life. She died at the age of 68 in 1983. The terrible events of those years are still with me, and I still sometimes suffer from nightmares in which I'm returned to those awful times. I came to England in 1967 and got married. We were together for just over 55 years until my husband died in 2022. Now I am lucky to have my wonderful, thoughtful and caring son, a lovely grandson, and now a great-grandson, Jago. Out of the tragedy, some joy and a happy life. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to Zhuza and her grandson, Boris.
Thank you. That was beautifully read, and it's wonderful to have you here today. Thank you. I'd now like to invite Haggerston School, who are going to speak to us about Cambodia's National Day of Remembrance. Thank you.
In 1984, the Cambodian government declared 20th of May a National Day of Remembrance to commemorate the victims of the genocide in Cambodia that took place between 1975 and 1979.
The Khmer Rouge seized power in Cambodia in April 1975 after years of guerrilla warfare and ruthlessly imposed an extremist program to reconstruct Cambodia on the communist model of Mao's China. They aimed to remove social classes and Western influences from the country, creating a year zero.
It is estimated that well over 2 million people were murdered during this period from execution, disease, exhaustion, and starvation.
Safari Ashley lost family members during the genocide in Cambodia and was forced to leave her home in Phnom Penh aged 10. She said, "I cannot forget my past. I suffer poor physical health as a result of the malnutrition, the overwork and beatings which I faced under Khmer Rouge. And emotionally too, I still bear the scars. I suffer from anxiety and nightmares when I'm reminded of what I went through."
Thank you so much, Haggerston School. I'd like to now ask Ruth Angel from Hackney to come up, and she's going to be reading Colours, a poem.
In a violent outpouring in 1994, approximately 1 million Tutsis and moderate Hutus were murdered in just 100 days in the genocide in Rwanda. Colours is a poem by Michaela Rogwizangoga and is a thought to all the survivors of the 1994 genocide. Red, blue, yellow, green, white, purple, jasmine, orange, azure. Old colours make way for new homes, a future spread with colours, a horizon without sorrow. Here ends our pain, here begins life.
Thank you so much, Ruth. I'd like to invite Sudanese Top, past Hackney Young Speaker, to speak now on remembering Srebrenica, an interfaith prayer from the Joseph Interfaith Foundation.
Master of the universe, you created all human beings in your own image. We remember the victims of Srebrenica's genocide, whose murderers refused to see your light in their faces. God of mercy, we remember with sorrow the thousands of young and old men, innocent lives destroyed brutally because of hatred and vengeance, the young dreams that never came to fruition, the old age that was not spent with family and friends. We remember with sorrow their loss to their grieving mothers, family and friends. God of generations, help us in our fight against vengeance, prejudice, and hatred. Strengthen us in our efforts to open benighted eyes, distorted visions through mistrust and misunderstanding. Enlighten us so there shall never be destruction in your creation again. May it be your will that the souls of the victims of Srebrenica genocide live in your eternal peace. May their families and friends be comforted in their sorrow. May it be your will that we learn to live together without prejudice and violence, but respect one another as human beings. Amen.
Thank you, Sudanese. I'd like to invite Erswick School, who are going to come and read Vigil for Dufour, a poem by Sabina Rowan Carlson. Thank you.
Vigil for Dufour by Sabina Rowan Carlson. Hold up your candle if you're an angel. Hold up your candle if the light of hope dances and curls about your spine, like the breath of light about the wick. Or blow out your candle if you believe that when these flames flicker out, we'll forget the faces we now see before us, the faces of the hopeful and the memory of the abused. Hold up your candle if the people standing alongside you have become your wings, and that side by side, you fly to a better place in time.
Hold up your candle, if you know that sound does not travel through air and wires, but rather through the chords of our hearts, and that we will never be able to claim that we cannot hear a single cry because a deafening ocean stood between us. Hold up your candle if you remember how the world forgot 800,000 Rwandans. Hold up your candle if you have a hole burnt into your heart by the Shoah, the Great Fire, the Holocaust. And hold up your candle if you can still see the smoke and taste the ashes.
Hold up your candle if you know that tears only feed that fire. And hold up your candle if you refuse to let the world sob itself to sleep, waiting for a wish. Because we did not listen to them, because we did not burn with them, because we did not tell them, I'm going to save you, here, I am your miracle. For who dares to say that miracles are simply the dusty spines of Bibles? Friends, look at the crying wings you stand, side by side with. Listen to the heavenly songs of hope and hope. Feel your heart rise through the halo above your head, to join with 100,000 others who will heal this world. Hold up your candle if you're an angel.
But who says that peace is impossible?
Whoever said that only angels speak for miracles?
And whoever said that we are not angels?
Thank you so much. That really was beautifully read. Can I invite Alina up, who's going to talk about her personal experience of being welcomed as a refugee here in Hackney. Thank you for speaking to us again today.
Good morning. My name is Alina Alkhova and I'm 34 years old. I come from Kharkiv, Ukraine, the country's second largest city, which lies close to the Russian border, about 40 kilometers away. During the first part of the war, Russia tried to overrun the city, but were rebuffed by Ukrainian forces. I'm staying in Clapton at the home of Councillor Michael Desmond, a friend of mine, under the Homes for Ukraine program. My mother also came here 2 times. About 300 Ukrainians have been welcomed in Hackney, many of whom have integrated with the community. attending churches, joining together in Facebook and WhatsApp groups, and getting jobs. I myself work as a translator and language tutor. Hackney is well known as a sanctuary for refugees and has continued to play a leading role, helping many Ukrainians during the conflict. Ukraine has a significant Jewish community, especially in Odessa and Kiev, but also in Kharkiv. The community re-established itself following World War II. President Zelensky is Jewish. Nazi occupation and terror caused the death of millions of Ukrainians, including around 1 million Jews. There were dozens of massacres, including at Kryatyn and Mykolaiv. The most notorious was on 29th and 30th of September 1941 at the Baba Yar ravine outside Kyiv, where 33,771 Jews were murdered. They had come from Kyiv expecting to be transported elsewhere. When the machine guns started firing, it was too late to escape. The full-scale war in Ukraine is one of the most brutal in the recent decades. Today is day 705 of the current war in Ukraine. After the events of the World War II and proclamation stating never again, it's shocking that war is happening once more in the heart of Europe. The horror and state of anxiety and hopelessness in which Ukrainians find themselves every single day is difficult to describe in words. Russian missiles target Ukrainian cities, killing children who sleep in their beds, killing young families, elderly people, innocent citizens. For the past 23 months, Ukrainian children have to live through their childhood in bomb shelters, or flee explosions to different parts of the world. Anything for the sake of safety. Can you imagine being a child of war? It's a psychological trauma for life. The most affected spheres by the war are still infrastructure, industry, and enterprise assets, medical and educational institutions, cultural, sports, and religious objects. Many thousands of Ukrainian soldiers have been killed and wounded. At least 10,000 civilians, including more than 560 children, have been killed, and over 1,800,000 have been injured since Russia launched its full-scale armed attack. I have just returned from Kharkiv and Kyiv in Poltava province, where my family live. The war has taken its toll. Many buildings in Kharkiv, which have been a thriving city, have been destroyed. The people are stoic and determined. The military needs all the help and support in terms of funding and armaments from Europe and the US that they can get. Nearly 40% of Russian public expenditure is now on so-called defense and military. Their economy has been put on a war footing to produce extra munitions. Ukrainians are very grateful for British, European, and American support. I express my gratitude to Michael Desmond, Hackney Borough, and the government of the UK, who supports refugees and gives us the opportunity to have a peaceful sky. After the Holocaust, we all hoped and prayed that Europe would never again see unjustified acts of aggression, abuse, and torture of ordinary citizens. We can only pray and hope for peace without the aggressor benefiting from the conflict. As I said last year, we must say never again and hope and pray, not now, never again. I give all my support to the people who lost their nearest and dearest, their friends, their homes, and a simple hope for tomorrow. We must overcome these difficult times, and yet we must speak loudly about our sorrow, so the whole world can hear us. Please support the armed forces of Ukraine. Please donate and pray for peace. We are invisible. Slava Ukraini!
Thank you so much. Thank you for your bravery and your honesty. I'd like to invite back Councillor Rathbone, who's going to share a piece for us now as well.
Just wonder, Madam Speaker, if we could just have a moment of silence, having just heard that account. Yeah, we just have a moment of silence and just think about what was said. Thank you. I just wanted to talk about someone who, in fact, was not known about for many years. And it's so often with genocide, like the Holocaust of World War II, there are many hidden heroes and hidden acts of human generosity in the midst of the horror and evil. But through the work of the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, some amazing acts of human love have come to be known. And one of those concerns a Muslim Iranian diplomat in World War II France. Thousands of Iranian Jews and their descendants owe their lives to this Muslim diplomat in wartime Paris, who was called Abdul Hussein Sadari, who risked everything to help other Iranians escape the Nazis, including many who were Jewish. He actually shunned publicity after World War II, and it took over 40 years for people to kind of find out his actual history. He suddenly found himself head of Iran's legation house or diplomatic mission at the start of World War II. Although officially neutral, Iran was keen to maintain its strong trading relationship with Germany. This arrangement suited Hitler. The Nazi propaganda machine declared Iranians an Aryan nation and racially akin to the Germans. However, Iranian Jews in Paris still faced harassment and persecution and were often identified to the authorities by informers. Sadari used his influence and German contacts to gain exemptions from Nazi race laws for more than 2,000 Iranian Jews and possibly others, arguing that they did not have blood ties to European Jewry. He used to hold lavish parties and cultivated many contacts in the regime. He was also able to help many Iranians, including members of the Jewish community, return to Tehran by issuing them with a new style Iranian passport that they needed to travel across Europe. And there's been quite a number of people who gave evidence of how that happened. When Britain and Russia invaded Iran in September 1941, Sadari's humanitarian task became much more dangerous. Iran signed a treaty with the Allies, and Sadari was ordered back to Tehran as soon as possible. But despite being stripped of his diplomatic immunity and status, he continued to resolve to remain in France and carry on helping Iranian Jews, at obviously considerable risk to his own safety, using money from his inheritance to keep his office going. Now, without going into some complicated details, he spun a story to the Nazis about Iranian Jews, playing with the Nazis' own twisted ideology. Using all of his lawyer's skill, he exploited the internal contradictions and idiocy of the Nazi ideology to gain special treatment for what he called the Juden, a term he had actually made up to describe Iranian Jews. He argued that they should be afforded special protection in the same way as non-Jewish Iranians who were considered pure-blooded Aryans according to Nazi ideology. While all this was being verified through the very slow bureaucracy of the German state, a Persian carpet dealer called Ibrahim Muradi drafted a list with the names, jobs and addresses of all the Iranian Jews of Paris. Sadari filed it with the German authorities, saying it was the list of the Jaguts of Iran. Somehow, he managed to carry on helping families escape from Paris at a time when an estimated 100,000 Jews were deported from France to death camps. As well as helping Iranian Jews and non-Jews, he also helped Turkish and Afghan nationals, as well as at least one British woman. The number of blank passports in Sadari's safe is estimated to have been between 500 and 1,000. It has been calculated that if each was issued for an average of 2 to 3 people, this could have saved the lives of over 2,000 individuals, as passports were often issued for the whole family. He was never recognized for his work during his lifetime, insisting that he'd only been doing his duty. He died in 1983. He was posthumously recognized for his humanitarian work in 2004 at a ceremony at the Simon Wiesenthal Center in Los Angeles. And as a filmmaker who made a documentary about him, which I think is still on the net, in 2017, said, Sadari was someone who really tried to help people and didn't care about their religion, their race, or where they came from. For him, it was just about helping humanity. And I repeat, it was just about helping humanity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rathbone, for sharing such an important story. I'd really like to invite Borough Commander James Conway, who's going to speak to us about working in partnership to stop division and prevent the spread of hate. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Tackling anti-Semitism, racism, and extremist ideologies has been a critical mission for policing and for me personally for the past 24 years. The continued relevance and necessity of that mission is proof that history must be remembered and that its lessons have to remain highly relevant today. My own family history in Poland adds a personal dynamic to this professional view, resulting in my very strong support for the importance of continued education and remembrance of the Shoah and all those genocides that we remember today. These factors also drive my determination to confront hate crimes in all its forms here in Hackney. It remains a strong measure of the health of our society that we are vigilant in preventing and pursuing crimes driven by prejudice. Holocaust Memorial Day has additional relevance for those of us in policing. We are invested with extraordinary powers on behalf of the state and must readily confront the fact that the Shoah and those other genocides we remember today were largely organised and perpetrated by organs of the state. We are therefore bound by an eternal obligation of vigilance to ensure that we remain accountable to both law and the public we serve. We must police within the law as it is, not as some might want it to be. On Holocaust Memorial Day, we remember the victims of anti-Semitism and wider hate crime, taking this opportunity to reaffirm that we will always stand with those who are victimised. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bearing in mind these terrible atrocities, we now seek to continue to make a commitment to not forget and to work to condemn the evils of prejudice, discrimination and racism, valuing a free, tolerant and democratic society. Civic leaders from Hackney's communities will now speak and we will have the statement of commitment. So I'd like to invite you forward. Thank you.
We recognize that the Holocaust shook the foundations of modern civilization. Its unprecedented character and horror will always hold universal meaning.
We believe the Holocaust should have a permanent place in our collective memory. And today we reaffirm our shared goals of commitment, of justice and understanding. A day like today is really important because it allows us to hear, albeit painful stories, to reinforce those memories. And as time goes on, making sure that we hear those stories. And when we speak of justice, that is what we do individually and collectively together to make sure that we stand up for all those that have seen injustice.
We must make sure that future generations understand the causes of the Holocaust and reflect upon its consequences. We pledge to remember the victims of Nazi persecution and of all genocide.
We value deeply the sacrifices of those who have risked their lives to protect or rescue victims as a touchstone of the human capacity for good in the face of evil.
We recognize that humanity is still scarred by the belief that race, religion, disability, or sexuality makes some people's lives worth less than others. Genocide, anti-Semitism, racism, xenophobia, and discrimination still continue. We have a shared responsibility to fight these evils.
We pledge to strengthen our efforts to promote education and research about the Holocaust and other genocide. We will do our utmost to make sure that the lessons of such events are fully learned.
We will continue to encourage Holocaust remembrance by holding an annual UK Holocaust Memorial Day. We condemn the evils of prejudice, discrimination, and racism in all its forms, including anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, hate expressed towards Gypsy, Roma, and traveller communities across sexuality and gender. In Hackney, we value a free, kind, and democratic society.
Thank you all. I will now light the candle as we remember those who have suffered and lost their lives during the Holocaust and other genocides. So please join me with a minute of silence for reflection. Thank you all. I would like to invite past speaker, Councillor Michael Desmond, who is going to read the prayer for the dead and memorial prayer to be read in Hebrew. Thank you.
So, of course, a number of people died during the Holocaust, whose names we don't know, although there have been efforts to determine the individual status of families and the circumstances in which they died. But of course, this can't be completed. Certainly in my own family, my mother's relatives in Poland died, and I don't know which ones. So this is a prayer for all those who died at that terrible time. This is called El Malach Rachamim, God full of compassion. Please stand. O God, who art full of compassion, who dwellest on high, grant perfect rest in thy divine presence to all the souls of our holy and pure brethren, whose blood was spilt by the murderers in Auschwitz, Belzec, Bergen-Belsen, Dachau, Majdanek, Sobibor, Treblinka, and other extermination camps in Europe, who were killed, strangled, burned, and buried alive for the sanctification of thy name. For whose souls we now pray, may their resting place be in the Garden of Eden. May the Master of Mercy shelter them in the shadow of his wings for eternity. May he bind their souls in the bond of life. Hashem is their heritage, and may they repose in peace in their resting place. Now let us say Amen. And if you stay standing, I'll now recite the traditional mourners' Kaddish. Yisgadal v'yisgadal shemay rabon b'yolmo divro kirusay v'yamlik malchusay b'hayachon uv'mayachon v'hayedi kol beis Yisrael b'gadol uvizman karim v'rimru amen. Yehei shemay rabon uvrol yilom olmeya olmaya. Yisborach v'yishtabach v'yishpa'al v'yishmasal v'yishmasay v'yishadav v'yishalei v'yishalo shemay t'kitshol b'riachu. Le'elam min chol v'choso v'shirasa tush v'choso v'ne'emoso the Ami Rob Yomov Yimru Omein. Yehei Shalom Rabba Min Shemaya V'hai Oleinu Yalko Yisrael Yimru Omein. Ose Shalom Bimbromov Hu Yase Shalom Oleinu Yalko Yisrael Yimru Omein. Sit down, please.
Thank you so much, Councillor Desmond. I'm now going to invite Rabbi Leah from Kahila Synagogue, who is going to read the prayer for peace. Thank you.
In a moment, I'm going to read the prayer for peace that Kahila North London, our progressive Jewish community here in Stoke Newington nearby off Clissold Park, reads probably too often. We don't read it always. We read it when we feel there's a moment that we need to pray for peace. And I've been struck in recent years how much that means we have read it, of course, unfortunately. And I share it with you today and want to just point out one thing about it before we read it, which is you'll have it there in your pamphlets. It is 3 paragraphs, and in a lovely way, I think, it's 3 different Jewish sources. So the first Jewish source is largely Mishnah Avot, the Mishnah, which was recorded over almost 2,000 years ago in what is now Israel and Palestine. And the second source is Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, who would have been in what is now modern-day Ukraine a few hundred years ago. And the final source, the final paragraph, is by Rabbi Jonathan Rayner, Zichrono Livracha, may his memory be a blessing. He was a eminent teacher and scholar and rabbi here in London after having been a survivor of the Shoah, of the Holocaust in Central Europe. Al shloshta devarim ha'olam kayam, al hadin v'al ha'emet v'al ha'shalom, bein ha'malchuyot uvein adam l'chavero. The world rests on 3 pillars: justice, truth, and peace. That is, both between nations and between individuals. Yehi ratzon milvanecha. May it be your will, O God, that war and bloodshed shall vanish from the earth, and that a great and glorious peace may reign forever in the world.
Let every human being realize and understand the basic truth that we have not been created for strife and discord, hatred and envy, but only so that we may come to know you, to whom all praise is due forever. It is not enough to pray for peace. We have to work for it, to challenge those who foster conflict and refute their propaganda, to ascertain and make known the truth, both when it confirms and when it runs counter to conventional views, to denounce injustice, not only when it is committed against us, but also when it is committed against others, to defend human rights, not only our own, but also theirs, to insist that peace requires sacrifice of pride or wealth or territory, to practice and promote the way of moderation, compromise, and reconciliation, and to build bridges of respect and understanding, trust and friendship across the chasms that divide humanity. And let us say, Amen.
Thank you so much for your contribution. We're now going to hear from the Olive School, who've recorded a piece of music for us called Peace Train by the Star Voices Children's Choir at the Olive School. Thank you. I think they deserve a clap. The song we've just heard, Peace Train, was kindly contributed by the Star Voices Children's Choir of the Olive School for Hackney's Holocaust Memorial Day ceremony. I'd personally like to thank every person here today for joining us to recognise and commemorate this very important day together as part of Hackney's community. Following the ceremony, there will be light refreshments available in the atria downstairs on the ground floor, and I look forward to speaking to as many of you as I can there. And again, thank you for being part of today's event. The music to follow is Shalom, provided by the East London School of Music. Thank you for today, everyone.